What is happening, everybody? This is Zach Dresch, and you are watching the Dresch Code, home of all things music from a Dresch perspective. I am joined by a very special guest this time around. We've got my good friend Sam Lenz. You know him from Backlot 605. He's a comedian, improvisationalist, and an all-around wonderful gentleman. Sam, how are you this evening?
Doing great, Zach. Thanks for having me on, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for being on. We had a lot in common, that a lot of bands and stuff that I realize not a lot of people talk about on YouTube and such.
Yeah.
And one of them is the Maine, which is a very underrated band as far as the pop punk, pop rock genre goes.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorites. Yep.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about your backstory about how you feel about the Maine, like what got you started into them? What was your inspiration for that?
Yeah. The Maine was it was one of the first bands that I got into on my own.
Sure.
My first concert that wasn't like a concert that I just went with my dad to was
Sure.
Boys Like Girls and Good Charlotte co-headlining, and the Maine and Metro
Sure.
Station opened for them. And so I'd never heard
was
of
that
the
like
Maine.
2008? That like
Yeah,
really
it was
early
2008, like one of their first. It might have been their first national tour. I don't even know.
I
But
think so, actually.
Yeah, I saw them. I was like, oh, these guys are pretty good. And I went and I got their CD that had just dropped. Can't Stop, Won't Stop.
Yeah.
And they were never they were my favorite band for a while. They
Sure.
weren't like a band that I was like, oh my god, the Maine. But
Yeah.
I picked up their EPs, I picked up their albums. I was like, this is good. And
Yeah.
then Pioneer hit, and it kind of just changed the game for me. And
For sure.
yeah, that was what turned me into a diehard fan.
Right on.
And yeah, I love this band. I've only seen them live once.
Nice. Okay.
My band played right around the block from them one night though in Des Moines. And
Wow.
I ran into John before our show, and I told him about it, and he was like, "Oh, that's cool. When do you go on?" And I'm like, "Well, we're headlining our Dinky Bar show, so we're going on like pretty much the same time you guys are." And he's like, "Oh, that sucks." And I'm like, "Oh my god, he would have actually gone to my show." And after that interaction, it was just like, I've never talked to him since, but I feel like John is my friend.
Yeah. I've actually heard nothing. I've heard nothing but good things about each individual member of the Maine, actually.
Yeah.
You feel like most bands of that genre or that era, a lot of them are just dicks. Like I've heard All Time Low are terrible people.
Yeah.
Well, not Alex. Maybe Alex. I'm not entirely sure. Well, since they're canceled now, I don't know how to say it.
Right.
But I mean, my personal experience with the Maine was I wasn't a big fan of them when they first came out, because at the time I was more into the late 90s, early thousands pop punk. And so I hated the neon pop punk that was out at the time. Like the Pretty Boy.
A little watered down.
Yeah. Like I liked Fall Out Boy and I liked Panic at the Disco, but All Time Low, the Maine, and Forever the Sickest Kids, that's where I drew the line for some reason. I was just done. I was not.
Like three of my favorite bands in high school. You just listed, man.
And it took me like 3 albums by each of those artists for me to really respect them. Like All Time Low, I don't like the early material as much. The Maine, I don't like the early material as much. We'll get into that. But it took like one of their albums to be like, holy shit, what have I been missing from this band this whole time? It was this album that got me to appreciate the stuff before and love the stuff ever since. And the same goes with All Time Low. I was not a big fan of So Wrong It's Right. Dear Maria was a good song. I liked it. But it took me until Nothing Personal to appreciate them.
I think Nothing Personal is still their best album. I
would say Don't Panic, then Nothing Personal for me.
Yeah. Don't Panic is really good too. Depending on the day, those might flip flop for me. Yeah, but I know what you mean. I fully went into the neon pop punk. Like that was my scene. I loved 303. Honestly, when you were asking me like what bands do you want to do, my first instinct was almost 303 because I'm like, no one talks about them, and those guys, I don't know what it is. It just it works for me. Cobra Starship was entirely my thing, like Gym Class Heroes. So like all that stuff, I was bought in hardcore. But the Maine is the band that A is still around from that era, and B has just continued to get better with age, in my opinion. I I think their career trajectory has just been incredible.
Yeah, their discography is way more impressive than anyone else in that era, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's because like they've always kind of stayed true to that. Like there's still a little bit of like dance party element stuff in their music, you know, like it's still jangly pop rock,
right?
You know,
Yeah,
but there's something of more substance within it, and that's just what I love about it, you know.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. I think yeah, they've kept the fun dance stuff, but they've always had a hint of like Springsteen and Petty in their music, but it's never it didn't really come out till Pioneer, but I could hear it in Black and White especially.
Oh yeah. Black and White had a couple of tracks that I was like, this could have gone on Tom Petty's Full Moon Fever and it wouldn't have felt out of place like at all. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. So I think that was the edge they had over all the other bands. Is like, oh, they actually have an appreciation for timeless rock musicians from that era, and the rest of the bands were just in it for the money and all this stuff. Where the Maine were actually in it to be songwriters and to have a prolific career, which I thought was cool. So
right. Yeah, it was clear from the get-go that they actually cared about like the quality of the music they were making, and I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
I mean, as much as I loved like Cobra Starship and like 303, like those guys are just in it to goof off and have fun, and I respect the hell out of that. But it's like, you know what I mean. There's not a lot of substance there. It's just
not at all
fun to put on. Yeah.
Any songs that had substance, they took it off the record, unless it was about substances. Then they were all about substances. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, I've seen the Maine twice. I saw them open for Taking Back Sunday in 2011.
Oh my God. Can I ask you something? And I hope I'm not spoiling our song ranking, but did they play their cover of Girls Just Want to Have Fun with Adam Lazzara?
No. That must have been after. I don't think they did it at the time. It was out at the time.
Yeah, it might not have been. It might have been because of that tour that they did that track together.
At the time, Pioneer had been finished recording, but they hadn't released it yet.
Shit!
They played a couple of one Pioneer track and one that eventually became a Forever Halloween bonus track, Ice Cave. They played that.
Yes.
And that opened the set, and that changed my mind. I'm like,
they opened the set with Ice Cave?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, because I think they're probably like, oh, this is Taking Back Sunday. They have an edge. We can do edgier shit. And so they opened with Ice Cave, and then they did My Heroine from Pioneer. Both songs no one had heard before, except for on tour.
Both songs that rip hard.
Yeah. And so I was enthralled by it. And then they played Right Girl, and then all the women came up to the front at that point. Then they were playing all their Black and White stuff, and then it was on and popping at that point. But they played a couple deep cuts right at the top, and I respected them for them doing that.
Oh yeah. Their set lists are always insane. Like I love to go online and check like the set lists that they've used on tours and stuff. And it changes from night to night, which they
never do the same set. Yeah.
Yeah. And B, they are not afraid to be like, hey, you might not know this. It's the third track off of our second EP that we ever did, but we're going to play it anyways. And it's going to be a country rock song now. And it's just like, I love that. They're so unpredictable live. And I think that's what makes them such a cool band to see. I'm bummed I only saw them once, but I saw them when they were touring Forever Halloween on the 8123 tour with Nick Santino. I think it was actually a Rocket to the Moon's like last big shebang before they called it quits. And then This Century was the opening band. And those guys, well, they called it quits shortly after that too, but those guys killed it live.
Yeah.
A lot of those bands. Impressed.
Yeah, those bands had like one album and then they were done because they were just like, oh, we're not as big. Okay.
Yeah, and it's like, I get it, man. I've been in an indie band. It sucks. Yep. There's no money in it.
Yeah.
You know, you want to have a life.
Yeah. The second time I saw them was in Sioux Falls in 2016. They co-headlined with Mayday Parade. And so that was the American Candy tour. And so they were playing mainly American Candy stuff and just, Yeah, it was great. It was awesome.
Oh, that sounds great. I need to see them again.
Yeah.
I think they might be at the Bel Air
I think maybe, yeah.
in Des Moines in like a week. And I saw
Yeah.
that today and I'm like, God, if I hadn't just taken a trip, I think I would go out and see them.
Yeah, if I wasn't just getting a new apartment, I would go see him in Minneapolis. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I get that.
Yeah. Well, shall we dive into our album rankings?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Do you want to start or should I start?
If you want to start, that's fine. I'm good.
All right. I just want to clarify, every album here is good. There's no like garbage albums from this band.
Yeah. In fact, like my top 5 are pretty much just tied for 1.
Yeah. Could probably say that. Yeah. My least favorite is their most recent album, XOXO, From Love and Anxiety in Real Time.
What?
Yeah, I don't.
That
it must
surprises
have been,
me.
I don't know what it was. I like a couple tracks on it, but the rest of the album just didn't quite do it for me. I think it was the wrong place, wrong time. And I tried this week. I went back, and I'm still like, it's just not catching me. I don't know.
Okay.
Like Lips is a great song. Sticky is a good song. Pretender is cool, but the rest of the album just doesn't quite get up to snuff for me. And it's weird because it's like one of the same producers as some of their best stuff. So I'm like, I don't know.
Didn't Wedgeworth come back for it?
Yeah. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, I should like this more than I do. I don't know what it is.
Okay.
Maybe it's just not the right. Maybe it's just the songs. Maybe I thought it was like, oh, maybe they just rushed it because it was COVID and they felt they had to put an album out or something. I don't know, but
yeah, it did. This was a really quick turnaround from You Are Okay to XOXO, which You Are Okay just had piss poor timing in its release. I mean, that album's momentum got demolished by everything that happened. So, that was not what I was expecting. That surprises me. I thought we were gonna have the same number 8, but
what's your number 8?
My number 8 is their first album, Can't Stop, Won't Stop.
Oh, okay.
Does that surprise you?
No, I mean, it makes sense. There's about 2 or 3 that I would guess that would be towards the bottom, and that was one of them, I'd say.
Okay, yeah. And it's not because it's a bad album. I think it's really fun. I think it's a prime example of like the best type of like you said, the neon pop punk of the time. I love that they're all in like matching vests and like gold glitter on their like. I just love that. I think they make fun of it all the time, but I'm like, no, that was part of like what made you guys stand out. Like that's part of what made me start watching you on stage. Was like, are they all like matching? That's cool.
Yeah. Right.
You know. So this era is just a lot of fun. Everything I Ask For is such a like cool track to open or it doesn't open, but you know what I mean, like, or does it?
Yeah. It's the first track. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I don't know if you listen to this. Yeah, the Maine Garrett and Pat did they do a podcast called the 8123 podcast, and they talked about this album and its legacy. They talked about this album's legacy and how like this is the one album that if we didn't play a single track off of it in our set list, no one would care. Like some people would, but if we didn't play one song off it, people would be like, "Oh, that's fine." And it's somehow their biggest selling album because that's when CDs were still selling at that point.
Right.
And so they're like, it's crazy because that's our highest seller, but that's the album that if we play anything off it, diehards will care, but most people will be like, yeah.
Well, and part of it is that it's what, 14 years old now?
Yeah, it's an immature album for sure. It's a very immature album. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it was when they were first starting off, like the people that are like now getting into them, what are the odds they're going to go all the way back to that like 2008 album? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it too, is like, I mean, I've listened to this album so much that it's kind of just been done to death for me.
Sure.
I like a lot of the tracks on it. I don't think there's like a skippable track on it. I just also think that sometimes this album bleeds together a little bit. You know? There are some standout tracks, but
First half's amazing. Second half, I kind of forget. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like We All Roll Along is such a banger. I love that song. And like, yeah, the first half of it, right through Into Your Arms, is really good. And then the rest of it is pretty much how a lot of the B-sides of those records were, where it's like they have a solid EP and then another EP of filler following it, you know?
Yeah.
So
yeah, well, "We'll All Be" is probably the best song on the second half because it's got this. I never expected the country vibe at the end. That was so different, but yeah. Let's get to our number sevens. My number 7 is "You Are Okay."
This is blowing my mind, man.
Yeah. The main thing is its production. That's why I don't like it as much. I feel like the strings aren't mixed well. I think that's part of it, in my opinion. And I don't think the songs are stronger than XOXO, but production and I think half the album just doesn't do it for me. Slip the Noose and Flowers on the Grave and Forevermore are the 3 songs that keep me listening to it. And it's like they're the bookends on the album. It's like the first track, the 5th track, and the 10th track. It's kind of like all over the place. None Without You's good, My Best Habit, but I just don't go back to this one as much. I don't know what it is. I think it was just because I was comparing it so much to the albums before it that I just expected another album like that, and I didn't get it, and I was frustrated. And so I just associate that with that. And also I associate this album with COVID more than XOXO for some reason. I just kind of do that.
Yeah, I can see that. I like this one. I don't have it much higher, but I have it higher than that. So
yeah. What's your number 7?
My number 7 is the one that I think the internet's gonna hate me for. It is Lovely Little Lonely.
The fuck?
Yeah. So
explain yourself.
It's the same reaction that Maria had when I showed her my list. I'm like, I think this is what I'm going with, and she's like, really? So I think that Lovely Little Lonely has some of the best songs that the Maine has ever recorded on it. I mean, there are some all-timers that are just, some of those songs are frankly incredible. And a lot of them are going to make the ranking in the songs that we do later. But I think half of this album's filler. I don't like the 3 title tracks.
I was just going to say that's probably why it's not my number 1. I'll get to it. Yeah. But the interludes are weird. There's a couple tracks in there where I feel like they're trying so hard to be the 1975.
Yes. Lost in Nostalgia. I don't like that song. I think it's terrible. Okay, I don't think it's terrible. It's very vibey. It's just it goes nowhere. You know what I mean? It just it's too repetitive, and that's also why You're Okay is actually not at the top of my list, is because I love that whole album up until the last 5 minutes of Flowers on Your Grave.
Yeah, that song's too long. It's too long.
It just goes on too long.
It doesn't need to be 10 minutes. It doesn't need to be 9 minutes long. Yeah.
Yeah. But that said, Lovely Little Lonely is still a banger of an album.
Yeah.
It's bold, it's daring, it does something different. It's just that I skip half of it because I feel like, it's one of these ambient tracks again or whatever, and I just don't necessarily think it adds anything to the album. And I almost wish they would have just released the non-filler songs as just an EP. Because I think it'd just be perfect then, because everything that's not filler on that album is great. It's just the rest, I don't know. It's just one of those weird albums that I just don't go back to it because of that. The only time I listen to anything from Lovely Little Lonely is when I have one of the main playlists going,
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
So
we'll get to where it's placed on mine in a little bit. I'm putting my poker face on
too.
Yeah. My number 6 is Can't Stop, Won't Stop. Same reasonings as you. I think why it's higher for me is nostalgia. That's probably why.
Yeah.
First half's great, second half, but the first half's so good that that's why it's not lower, but it's not higher either. The second half just kind of, Even the band would tell you that. They're like, oh yeah, we don't play that song in the set for a reason. It's not great.
Yeah. I think they're like, I actually think they're more critical of their past selves than I think any of their fans are. Because I think there are a lot of fans that would go to bat for this album, be like, there's not a skippable track on it. And I mean, we obviously don't feel that way, but I don't think the Maine does either. I don't think the band does either. I think they look back at their old albums and they're like, oh, we would have done this differently. But that's part of just being an artist in general, right? You're never happy with something once it's done.
Yeah, I think that's part of it too. Yeah, it's their first album. They're really freaking young, but it's fun. It's not an album you mean to take seriously, but there's more tracks I come back to than You Are Okay and XOXO. So that's why it's number 6. Yeah. How I ranked each album was how many songs do I come back to on each album?
Okay. I had a similar approach. Mine was more like, what are the albums that I continuously keep going back to? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, which ones am I revisiting more often? Yeah. And so my number 6 is Black and White, which is an incredible album.
Yeah. I think it's appropriate. It's appropriately placed there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's their label album. Yeah. And the fact that their voice comes through as much as it does on this big major label album is a testament to just how good they are. I know the label wasn't happy with this record, and they were even less happy when they presented them with Pioneer, which is why they aren't doing anything with major labels anymore. And I love that. But I think Black and White is just it's one of the best, like, sellout, for lack of a better word, records that there is. You know?
Oh yeah.
I think it actually does take their sound and matures it. It gives new flavors. Some of my favorite songs that they've ever written are on this record. I love the closer, Color. I think that's such an incredible song, and I actually think the back half of this album is really solid. This is the first in a line of many albums that I'm like, yeah, there's not a skippable track on this. You know?
Yeah. Which makes sense. Yeah, it's my number 5. So
okay.
Yeah, let's continue that discussion. I totally agree with all your points. The only thing that bothers me about this album is some of the lyrics are a little cringy, but that's about it. Like, because they were still young, like texts I sent to your phone or something like that. Even John in an interview said, "Yeah, I hate that line. I don't know why I wrote that."
Yep. You know what's funny? So when I spoke at my high school graduation, I used lyrics from growing up in my graduation speech.
I like it. That's good.
Yeah.
It's good. It's a good song.
Yeah.
I just watched.
This album is great.
Yeah, there's like most of the tracks are solid, and they don't blow me away, but it's like a solid, fun album just listen to, just to have it. Yeah, at first I didn't quite like it. I don't know what it was. Maybe just because at the time I wasn't vibing with John's voice quite yet. I don't know what it was. Like,
okay.
I felt like he was trying too hard to be like Springsteen at the time, or like singing like growing up. Like, but now I'm like, yeah, I love it. It's awesome.
I mean, when you hear him talk, he sings almost exactly like he talks.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I always thought, like, when I first saw them live, John always has this look like he's stoned and just doesn't want to be there. But that's just how his face looks when he's on stage.
Yeah. Until like one of the band members cracks a joke that you can't hear, and he starts laughing halfway through the song.
Yeah. And I do like his vocal techniques, because like when there's songs he can't really sing high anymore because they're so old. He just has the audience sing it. Like with Girls Do What They Want, he just lets the audience sing it. He's like, here, take it.
I love that. They're they have so much energy live.
Oh
yeah. So my number 5 is You Are Okay.
Okay.
Which I think, I don't know. I guess I like this album a lot more than you do, but I only put it about 2 higher. But this just has so many tracks on it that I love. I like the use of the strings. I agree. Like, it threw me off the first time I listened to it. I was like, gosh, this just doesn't seem like there was just something that didn't click with me right away. This is an album that grew on me over time. I think Tears Won't Cry is incredible. Heaven We're Already Here is like, I just love the imagery in that song. I just think lyrically this is one of John's strongest works. And so, like, odd sounds aside, I think that lyrically I connected with this album a lot more than some of the other ones. And yeah, I don't know. This album is great to me. I really wish that it would have had its day in the sun.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you know, the world had other plans.
Yeah.
But yeah, I dig this. So that's my number 5. And now we get into the top 4, which is like the holy grail of albums. Like, this is where I was just like, I don't even know. I could literally just pick at random for me personally, and like it would work, you know?
Yeah. So you have XOXO in your top 4?
I have XOXO in my top 3.
What? Yeah. All right, we'll get into that. We'll get into it. it. My number 4 is Pioneer.
Okay.
It's not quite as high.
About that one later. Gotcha.
Yeah. I think it was the starting point to the whole rest of their career. Most of the songs are fantastic. Only a couple I don't skip, but I'm just like, just like it's waiting for my time to come just doesn't do anything for me. Yeah, waiting for my time to come didn't do much for me. I'm trying to think. There's a couple tracks on here that don't do it for me, but that's about it. The rest of the album is great.
Okay.
But yeah, every track is fantastic. But I just like the energy of the next 3 a little more than this one.
Yeah, I get you. Maria, when I like really got into this album, she was very much like, it's just like there's no energy to it. It's so like mellow, and I was like, I mean, there are tracks that rip on it, but I get what she's saying. And so when we went to see them at Forever Halloween, her response was like, "What do you even do at a Maine show? Just like sway back and forth and hum along with them?" And they opened with Misery, but they opened with like a hardcore grunge version of it.
That's great.
And it was cool. And I looked over at her. I'm like, you feel like swaying back and forth and humming right now? Yeah, it was a really cool opening. But yeah, Pioneer is great. I like Pioneer. Yeah. My number 4, and this is one that I struggled with because I want all of these to be higher than they are, is Forever Halloween.
Yeah, that's the black sheep of the discography, I think. That's the black sheep where it's like, where do you put this one? I'm not quite sure. Because some Maine fans, it's too dark for them. Some, it's not. So it's like, where do you put it? Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah. I really, like, when this album first came out, I think I would have called it my favorite, the Maine album. Like, I fell for this album hard. Yeah. And I think part of why it's not higher is like I burned myself out on a lot of this record.
Sure.
You ever have those where it's like, I mean, Green Day's American Idiot is that for me. It used to be my favorite album of all time. And now it's like I hear the opening riff to Jesus of Suburbia and I'm like, no, please. Dear God, I've just heard it too many times. Like, 6th grade me just wore that to the ground. And that's kind of what Forever Halloween was for me. It was like I was still riding the high of Pioneer, and I loved that record so much, and my hype was so high for Forever Halloween that I just dove headfirst into it. And this album is incredible. I don't think there's a skippable track on it. I think it's one of the best album closers in Forever Halloween, the title track. And the deluxe version that adds like the 5 bonus songs, all of those are really good too. So I just, and this is the one that I saw him live for, and I love this band and I love this record. So this, I'm bummed it's not higher for me, but right. Forever Halloween
Yeah.
would be my number 4.
Yeah, it's my number 3, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, every song is great. Showed a definite, it was a tighter version of Pioneer, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And the producer of the album is one of my songwriting heroes. Brendan Benson produced it.
Yeah.
And I love him in the
didn't use
Raconteurs
like
and his
clicks
solo
or
stuff.
anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brendan Benson is a great songwriter. And I think he really pushed that into them and said, hey, don't overdo this. Just don't overthink it. Just write the song. Just let it do itself and you'll be good. Like, and that totally worked.
Yeah. It's like a perfect mirroring of their pop sensibilities, which I think Brendan kind of brought out a little bit more. And then that like grungy kind of like that unclean feel that they always want to kind of have in their records. So, yeah,
for sure. That's probably why it holds such a dear place in my heart. It's just, it's a great album and it's produced by one of my favorite musicians. So that's probably part of it too.
Yeah. The hype for that one was real. I liked it.
Yeah. What's your number 3?
My number 3 is your number 8. It's XOXO. I really dig this record. I was shocked when it was the first one out of your mouth, to be honest with you. I was expecting us to kind of be on the same page with that. I love this thing. It just start to finish. It just, I don't know. There's something about the sunny yellow aesthetic, and it came out in the summertime, which I think is perfect, like for the type of record that it is. And I just remember walking all summer with this thing playing in my headphones. Face Towards the Sun is such an emotional wallop to me. I don't know like what it is, but just like lyrically and the way it's so dynamic in its build to the end, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's just something about this record that just puts a smile on my face from start to finish. And If Your Light Goes Out is one of my favorite songs that they've ever written. I just think that song is beautiful and just speaks, I don't know, just speaks volumes to me. And then I'm sorry, I'm just going to list off the tracks that I love, I guess. Anxiety in Real Time is just, you just know that John he's taking you through a panic attack. It's like, and it's so real. It's such a real song. And it's one of the best examples of like, sometimes I feel like this band is speaking directly to me because they're so open and honest. And that's one of the perfect examples of it. And so, I love this record. I totally understand the reasons that you don't. But
I think I need to revisit it. I need to revisit it. I think this one I could easily be more swayed to enjoy more than You Are Okay. Probably because it's the same producer as my favorite Maine albums. So it's kind of like that makes more sense. And
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's good. It's definitely, it's the closest thing to like bubblegum pop that they've done so far. I think.
For sure.
Yeah. It's a little not Cobra Starshipy, but you know what I mean. Like it feels a little throwback sometimes, and I like that. So.
For sure. I think I just need to listen to it more than I have. Probably maybe just has to do with something with the timing of its release. It's like my number 2 is Lovely Little Lonely. And I think at the time it came out, I was just youthful and naive and just enjoying life. And it had a fun Third Eye Blind vibe to it. And that's why I liked the album so much. And I didn't care that the interludes were weird as fuck. I just liked it. I liked the vibe and all the songs were great. It's got that bounce and groove to it. I just dig it. So that's and the songs that hit fucking hit.
100%. How Do You Feel is like, like there are times where I'm just like singing along with that song and I tear up just because I'm like, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
All the tracks on it are awesome. We'll get to that in the song listings, but the The album, I just like it's like this nighttime pop rock vibe to it, and I just love it. It's whereas American Candy's like the daytime pop rock album, Lovely Little Lonely's the nighttime pop rock album. That's how I kind of view it.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I like that. I like that a lot. I think Lovely Little Lonely is also like maybe tied with Forever Halloween as their most like emo record, you know?
Oh yeah, I can see that for sure.
Yeah. And I do like when they go emo. I think that's like the best.
Yeah. So. Yeah, for sure. Sure. What's your number 2?
My number 2, which gives away obviously my number 2 is going to give away my number 1. It's American Candy.
Okay.
I love this record. This is the Maine album. I think this might be like if someone was like, I need an introduction to this band, this is the album that I would hand them.
Totally.
It's just personal preference that puts one above that. This album from start to finish is just incredible. When I say there's not a bad song on this record, I mean there's not even a remotely even mediocre song on this record. Yeah. This is a record that honestly I almost just put all 10 songs in our top 20.
Yeah, I was close to that too.
Like, damn, how do you cut any of these? You know, I wanted to spread the love amongst all the records, but I was also like, this album front to start to finish is just incredible.
If you look at their set lists, this is the album that has the most tracks played consistently night after night, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and for good reason. This is actually one of the rare records just in general where side B is my favorite. I love everything on side A, but I think this record just grows into something so cool and unique and heartfelt in its second half that I'm just you know, they start off with some like fun tracks, you know, like what's that, Same Suit, Different Tie. And then My Hair, which I think that song is great. I love that one. Yeah. But those are like kind of fun, like, and then English Girls. And then all of a sudden, like 24 Floors hits. And it shifts into something a little bit more meaningful. And you're just like, oh God, we're doing something here. And I love it. I love it.
Yeah, that is American Candy is my number 1. So that I was a fan. American Candy made me a super fan, and so that's why it's my number 1. There's no filler, there's no interludes, there's no weird ass kind of tracks that are like, oh, there's just an airy 45 seconds between each track. No, it's just 10 tight, concise tracks, and that's why it's my number 1. There's not a bad song on it. There's a couple I'm like, it's fine, but it flows with the album so well that I'm like, okay. Like Unlost and My Hair are the two that I'm like, I don't hate, but I'm just like, it's there. If I had to cut 2 off.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that. But it's funny because I think a lot of the fan base disagrees with Unlost. Like the fan base loves that song, and I like it too. It's a good song. I just think it's
compared to everything else on the album,
good as everything else on the album.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. And so your number 1, is
this record just, like I said earlier this was a game changer for me. It came out the year I graduated. So it came out the fall after I graduated high school, and just a bunch of bullshit was going on in my life, and it was one of those like weird years where I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I mean, I'm sure everybody has that, maybe right out of high school, I don't know. But I absolutely had no idea where I was going. I was trying to make it in music, and it was just, you know, like things were just weird. And this album was there for me and picked me up. And like, I remember hearing Misery for the first time and just being like, this is one of the best songs I've ever heard in my life. Like, this is incredible. I want more of this. And this record just, it pulled me through a lot. And so I'm always indebted to it. I love it. it's imperfect. Like I said, the like end track is really weird and it goes on too long. But like, man, they take some big swings on this, and I think it pays off. I love the country fried Southern rock element that's kind of throughout it. So yeah, Pioneer is just my favorite, the Maine album. I love it.
There you go. Yeah, that was the game changer. That was one that made me turn my head and be like, oh, the Maine's not so bad. and then Forever Halloween's like, oh, they're getting warmer. And then American Candy is like, I'm wet.
Yes.
I don't know if I might have to bleep. I might have to bleep that out. I don't know, but I'm not at 1,000 subscribers yet. Whatever.
Watch, this will be the one that goes viral.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, man.
But yeah, that does it for our album rankings video. For all of those of you watching at home or wherever you're watching, comment below what your rankings would be. Is it American Candy dead last like a moron? Or is it Pioneer dead last like a moron? Let us know what you think in opposite land. If you're okay as your favorite, you're not okay with us. That's all I'm going to say. So, Sam, thank you for being here for this episode. This discussion is not over. Absolutely. Stay tuned for our top 20 the Maine songs. This one's going to be a barn burner, folks. So be sure to like, subscribe, tickle that bell, and all that good stuff. And we'll see you on the next video here on the Dresch Code.